Hi, welcome everybody. This is Daryl Henry, the Executive Director of the Western Caucus Foundation, and we're pleased to present another one of our Digital Connect briefings for you all. Today, we're going to be really diving deep into a study that was just completed on Western states and tribal nations' natural gas initiatives. It's a very important study, basically showing U.S. leadership and how we can help reduce global emissions. Just for those who are on, for Q&A, just type it in the chat box and we will get to that at the end of the presentation. But I would like to introduce our chairman, the chairman of the Senate Western Caucus, Senator Steve Daines from Montana, for some introductory remarks. Senator.
Daryl, thank you. And a warm welcome to everybody in the Western Caucus's Digital Connect Forum. And first and foremost, I want to thank Andrew Browning, the president of Western States and Tribal Nation, for being with us today. I'm also excited to have Mr. Browning and his team here discuss the report on how U.S. energy actually reduces global emissions. And this is because of American innovation. And because of that innovation, we lead the world in energy-related emission reductions. We need to be also leading the world in energy production and increasing exports to our allies and others. I will tell you from the view here on the United States Senate, it's crazy to think that we have a growing number of senators on the Democrat side, sadly, that are looking to decrease natural gas production. In fact, we just had an amendment fail on the floor yesterday that was going to make sure that we didn't allow the craziness that's going on in places like California and now in Massachusetts, where they're not allowing new construction to hook up to natural gas. But if the U.S. continues to lead in energy production and increasing exports, it's going to lead to a stronger America. It's going to reduce global emissions and importantly, provide stronger relations with our allies. So I look forward to hearing more from our panel today. Mr. Browning, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Senator. Thanks for having us here. A quick overview on Western states and tribal nations. We're a unique organization in that we were founded essentially by state governments and tribal governments to address some of the policy, advocacy, and political challenges regarding getting what we kind of consider our stranded natural gas of the Rockies basins out for export to their natural markets, specifically in Asia, which, as you all probably know, is a growing market. I think over the next 30, 40 years, 70% of all global growth in LNG consumption are going to come from the East Asian markets. And so we formed an organization, and I'm going to list our membership, that includes the Ute Indian tribe, the state of New Mexico, represented by the Energy, Minerals, Natural Resources Department, state of Utah, sponsored by the Utah Governor's Office of Energy Development, the state of Wyoming, sponsored by the Wyoming Energy Authority, Blackhawk Energy, which is a Jicarilla Apache tribe energy company, the state of Baja California, Mexico, which holds potential for LNG export from the North American West Coast using our Rockies gas, the Southern Ute Indian tribe of Colorado, and then the Western Colorado counties of Garfield, Mesa, Moffett, and Rio Blanco. And understanding what Senator Daines kind of outlined as some of the politics of climate change, we felt it was important to do scientific analysis, really from wellhead to burner tip, from our basins, showing that export, and I'll let Dr. Kasumu go into the methodology and the metrics that we laid out for this, but showing that the impact that Rockies natural gas could have on reducing emissions in these Asian countries. Really, I would say, especially in countries like India and China, where growth in the emissions is exponentially happening. I would say the low hanging fruit is to reduce emissions is to import our gas and reduce emissions. And I would like to, before I turn it over to Dr. Kasumu, I would like to thank and recognize our report's sponsors, which include the Ute Indian tribe, the United Brotherhood of Carpenters, Launa, Colorado laborers, Duchesne County, Utah, Uinta County, Utah, the Utah School and Institutional Trust Land Administration, the Utah Governor's Office of Energy Development, Four Corners Innovation, Four Corners Economic Development, and the Wyoming Energy Authority. So without their sponsorship and support for this study, it would not have been possible, and I just want to recognize them. Dr. Kasumu, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Andrew, for that introduction. And I want to especially thank Senator Daines for being with us today and all the other people who have made this possible. Over the next about 15 minutes or thereabout, I'm going to be sharing a few slides to go over the highlights of the study that has been talked about by Senator Daines and Mr. Browning. So if you bear with me a second, I'm just going to share my screen, PowerPoint. Is it visible? Okay, thank you. So first of all, I would like to state that this work was done by mainly three of us, myself, and then Dr. Lauren Bergenheyer and Dr. Kerry Kelly, both from the University of Utah. They're not able to join us today, but I would like to acknowledge their contributions to this study. Over the next 15 minutes or thereabout, I'm going to go over the premise for this research study, the main results, and the conclusions or comments that we have had resulting from this study. The premise is a 2018 peer-reviewed study that was published in Environmental Science and Technology that was done by myself and about 4 other authors from 4 different universities, including MIT, Southern Methodist University, Johns Hopkins University, University of Calgary. This study looked at the life cycle assessment of Western Canadian natural gas for export to Asian countries for electricity generation. And it looked at the effect of displacing local sources of electricity generation under different scenarios, considering things like country level factors, such as electricity transmission and distribution, ocean transport, and power plant fleet efficiencies. It is noteworthy to state here that this study makes use of publicly available data sources from government institutions, from peer-reviewed studies, and several reports, and it details all of the life cycle stages and activities provided in this report. The premise of this study, which I mentioned before, is captured on this screen, and what it shows is that an export of Canadian natural gas, specifically from Western Canada, would reduce all the numbers that are shown on the right-hand side, on the table that are shown on the right-hand side, when about 25 megatons of liquefied natural gas is exported to the different countries. Initially, we had started with about 22 countries in an earlier study that was done before this one. And based on all of the scenarios we looked at, we thought that it was most viable to reduce potentially the most viable countries of import to China, India, Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan, based on a number of factors, including how much LNG import these countries do, what are the LNG import infrastructures, what is the demand, and what is the economic benefit, and things like that. So we found that exporting certain amount of liquefied natural gas from Western Canada would reduce total emissions in China by about 52.6 megatons per year if marginal electricity is displaced. So as you can see on the right-hand side, we did different scenarios, whether you displace whole mixed electricity, dispatchable electricity, or marginal electricity. And the different numbers show how much CO2 emissions will be reduced by the country in question importing liquefied natural gas from Canada and using it to displace the kind of electricity mix that is shown on the right-hand side. And one of the main conclusions of the study is actually that the potential economic and environmental benefits have made the justification for exporting natural gas from Canada to the Asia Pacific compelling, with China, India, Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan being the most likely destinations. That was one of the main conclusions of the study. Now, based on this study, we were told to do a similar study using the same premise to perform a study that would look at the effect of exporting liquefied natural gas from Western United States, and the natural gas would be extracted directly from the Rocky Mountains that cover the 4 states of Colorado, New Mexico, Wyoming, and showing all the 8 different from the 8 different basins that we have here. So the Powder River, Bighorn, Wind River, Greater Green River, Uinta, Piceance, Paradox, Denver, Julesburg, Raton, and San Juan basins. On the right hand, on the y-axis, we have the gas volumes, because it was necessary to first of all determine do we have enough gas volumes from the Rocky Mountains of the US to be able to export liquefied natural gas to make it viable? And the answer from the United States Geological Survey studies is yes. And this graph shows the gas volumes that we have from all the 8 different basins that were considered. This graph here shows the undiscovered gas resource, the proven reserves, and the production for the year 2017. On the y-axis is the gas volume in billion cubic feet, and on the x-axis is the 4 states, which I referred to earlier, that make up the Rocky Mountains in the US, Wyoming, Utah, Colorado, and New Mexico. The green bar is the undiscovered gas reserve. The blue bar is the undiscovered gas reserve. The red one is the proven reserve, while the green one is the 2017 production. As at the time of compilation of this result, the latest result that we had for production was 2017. But then, and we know that now, more recent data has been published. But what this graph is trying to say is that there is enough of proven gas reserve based on the annual production for the year 2017 to actually supply the LNG export from the 2 proposed terminals of Coos Bay in Oregon and Baja California for at least 12 years as at the compilation of this result. But we know that with the improvement in technology and a revision of proven gas reserves, it's possible that there is even more gas to supply whatever export terminals that are going to be used, that I mentioned, for more than 12 years, based on improve in technological survey and more data. On the right-hand side, you have the marketed gas production, and it shows that it varies from year to year. We have for the last 18 years, from 2000 to 2018, and it varies from year to year. Thus, only the latest year, which was 2017, was used as a benchmark for future production, such that any excess based on the proven reserve was used in calculating the number of years that could be supplied, that natural gas could be supplied as export from the Rocky Mountain basins. In this chart, it's important to, first of all, look at how electricity generation has changed over the years in the 5 countries that have been proposed as the most likely import countries of Rocky Mountains natural gas. And these are China, India, Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan. Looking at data sources from published data, in China, we can see that the electricity generation has increased between the years 2010 to 2018, as almost doubled, from 3,009 to 7,182 terawatts. On the right, on the y-axis is the terawatt hour of electricity generated, and same thing with India. It has increased from 904 to 1,583 terawatt hour of electricity generated. And we can see the increase in Japan, and Japan slightly decreased between those years, and while there's an increase in South Korea and Taiwan as well. Now, why is this important? This is important because it shows that there is an ever-increasing demand, as we all know, of energy all over the world. And this ever-increasing demand has to be satisfied one way or the other. If it's not coming from North America, it's going to come from somewhere else for sure. These two charts, excuse me. Just trying to go back to the last chart. Okay, so the 4 charts here show the difference in electricity generated from both coal and natural gas over the same years that we just reviewed for the last slide. On the top left-hand corner, you have electricity generated from coal for the 5 countries that we mentioned. And you can see that even electricity generated from coal in absolute terms has actually increased from 3,000 terawatt hour in 2010 to almost 5,000 terawatt hour in 2018. And we can see, even though to a lesser extent, similar increases in India, Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan, excuse me. And on the right-hand side, on the top right-hand side, you can see electricity generated from natural gas. While that of generated from coal has increased, that generated from natural gas has also increased. But this is in absolute terms. This is in terawatt hours. So, for example, in China, the amount of electricity generated from natural gas has increased from about 60 terawatt hours to more than 200 terawatt hours. And you can see similar increases in Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan, except India. However, if you look at the 2 bottom charts on the left-hand side, you have the share of electricity generated from coal. It has actually decreased. So what this tells us is, even though the absolute amounts of electricity generated from coal in China has increased, but the share of electricity generated from coal has decreased from about 76% in 2010. It has reduced to about maybe 67% in 2018, which means that something is actually taking the share of electricity generated from coal over the years. Now, could we say that this is natural gas? Of course, that would be a very good answer, because we can see that the share of electricity generated from natural gas has actually increased in the same time period. If you look at the bottom right-hand chart, so you see natural gas electricity generation share has increased from about 2% in China to about 4% in the same time period. So as the share of electricity generated from coal continues to decrease over the years, the share of electricity generated from natural gas continues to increase over the years. But the share of electricity generated from natural gas is still a very, very tiny fraction. It's still about 4% from this chart, while that generated from coal, even though it has reduced, is still more than 60%. So we see from this that there is a lot of room, to grow for natural gas to replace coal as a source of electricity generation in many of these potential import countries. And the same can be seen in India, Japan, South Korea, and China. Most of them still have, India, for example, still has less than 5% of its electricity being generated from natural gas. Just because of time, and I'm just going straight to the summary of the results of the study. The full study, of course, can be seen in the link that was sent to everybody. We see in this slide that the comparison of the life cycle emissions, if we were to export LNG from Western United States to these 5 countries that we have talked about, the total life cycle emissions from extraction going to production and processing, transmission in gas pipelines, to liquefaction, to export, shipping on ocean transport, shipping, and regasification in the import countries, usage in the power plants for electricity generation, and then transmission to the end users. All of the life cycle stages have been considered, and data sources, publicly available data sources, have been used to aggregate the total life cycle emissions for exporting liquefied natural gas from Western United States to this import country. And what we find out is that the total life cycle emissions for this process is about 600 kilograms CO2 per megawatt hour of electricity by the time it gets to the end user in China, for example. And now this is being compared to publicly available data sources from the Department of Energy and NETL and other published sources on this chart. So for example, this shows what would happen if we were to export US natural gas from the Rockies Mountains to China, and if China were to be using their own local sources of coal-fired electricity generation. And we can see that the life cycle emissions from natural gas exported from the US is much less. It's about 600 kilowatt CO2 equivalent per megawatt hour of electricity generated, while from the different reports for coal-generated electricity in China, you're talking about more than 1,000 kilowatt CO2 equivalent per megawatt hour of electricity generated. And same thing can be said for India as well. India, you have, from different reports, more than 800 or between 800 and 1,250 kilogram CO2 equivalent of CO2 per megawatt hour of electricity generated. And for the third chart, which is the bottom right, bottom left-hand corner, which depicts that of Japan, is the same story, and same thing for South Korea as well. So what this shows is that the total life cycle emissions, if the natural gas from the Rocky Mountains were to be exported as LNG to these countries, and compared to the life cycle emissions of local coal-fired electricity, there is a lot of savings. And this chart shows the potential savings that is possible based on the export of the proposed 22.8 megaton per annum equivalent of US West Coast LNG to displace the same amount of electricity generated in these import countries, which will be about 157 terawatt hour of electricity. This table shows that on a life cycle basis, that for example, in China, there would be a 42% reduction on a life cycle basis if all of this 22.8 megaton per hour per annum of natural gas were to be exported to China to displace the equivalent amount of coal-fired electricity in that country. And the same column, the highlighted yellow column, shows the percentage reduction for other countries, which will be 49.8 reduction in India, 52.1 in Japan, 54.8 in South Korea, and 37 in Taiwan. Now, this is based on a 100-year basis, 100-year global potential warming GWP basis. If we were to consider the 20-year basis, it would be completely different, because then we have different forcing functions of values for the global emissions gases. And for the column just to the left of the highlighted column, this shows the actual difference in emissions. So what this means is that if we were to displace that 157 terawatt of electricity using the US West Coast natural gas from the Rockies, the reduction, the absolute reduction in the global emissions will be just 1.4%. However, the more you increase how much you export to these countries, that number will continue to increase. So if you were to double to say maybe 300, for example, that percentage will increase to about 2.8%. But the life cycle reduction does not change. The only thing that can change the life cycle reduction will be to improve our processes in North America, such as capturing more of methane emissions in the upstream sector and things like that. And translating to the actual absolute emissions in terms of CO2 equivalent, the last column shows that. So for that 42% reduction in life cycle emissions in China, based on export of 22.8 megatons per annum of natural gas from the Rockies, you would see a reduction, the potential reduction of about 71.4 megaton CO2 equivalent per year. And the numbers for all the other countries are shown in that column as well, about 100 for India, 106 for Japan, and so on and so forth. So with that, I would like to conclude with a few remarks from the study, that we all know that energy demand is continuously growing, and this growth in energy demand has to be satisfied one way or the other. LNG demand potential is high, not just for power generation, but for other uses, and North America can play a role in helping to satisfy this demand for energy. And this study shows that natural gas, could serve as a bridge fuel in achieving global GHG reduction goals, because we know that the growth of renewables is not nearly fast enough, to cope with the demand, the increase in demand in energy. And also, a lot of the data that we have used in this study are conservative and are dated. And as more data, comes out, and as technology improves, there is more, capture of methane, for example, in upstream emissions. So the data keeps getting better, and the savings in GHG reductions, keeps getting better with better technologies, with better regulations, and improved data sets. And finally, LNG export from US can both economically and environmentally be beneficial, considering the net global GHG emissions reduction. I know that it's easy for some people to say, yeah, but you're going to be increasing, the emissions, from the source. But if you look at a net global, where you're decreasing it in the import countries, I think there is a net, based on the data that we have, there is a net global reduction. And we all know that, things like, carbon offsets, carbon trading and credits are becoming the order of the day, and are becoming more common and more common in the world of today. So with that, I thank everybody for listening, and I'll be happy to take questions if there are any.
Perfect. Thanks so much. And thanks, Mr. Browning, Dr. Kasumu. We had a slight glitch at the beginning, so I'm going to have two questions for you, if possible. I guess first, though, for anyone that does have questions, please type it into that Q&A box, and we'll be able to get to them. But since we had that slight glitch, Mr. Browning, Dr. Kasumu, could you give us just the 2 bullet points of why this study is so important, and why we're highlighting it today?
I think I can take that on. This document is a technical document, but I think it is something that we can use in terms of policy and advocacy as we continue to work to build out export facilities on the North American West Coast. There is opposition that claims that that type of activity will only increase emissions, and we feel that this is solid technical evidence to address that. That if you're looking at energy production through the prism of climate change, and I'm not knocking for people who focus or emphasizing the importance of that, but this is really the low-hanging fruit. Exporting our gas to replace the coal that is being used, mined and used in India and China is the lowest hanging fruit to pluck from the tree to reduce climate change. So we felt that this was an important piece of work to introduce to the discussion on exporting energy from the North American West Coast, and let's have the debate based on facts and real analysis. And so we're very happy to connect with Dr. Kasumu to produce this.
Great, thanks, Andrew. I'd like to also highlight and recognize Meghan Thacker, former executive director of the Senate Western Caucus. If you have anything further to add on the importance of the study and what you all set out to do.
Yeah, thanks, Daryl. Hello, everyone. Good to see everyone. I recognize a lot of names here that are here, so good to see you. And thanks to the Western Caucus Foundation and Joshua and Sean and for facilitating this today. And I would echo what Andrew was able to say, that as there's the debate ensues on how to reduce global greenhouse emissions, we want LNG from Western states to be part of the solution. And I think that is the goal of the presentation today. And Dr. Kasumu has some good, firm science to back it up.
Great. We had a question out there. If you could talk on the impacts, the importance of finishing a project like Jordan Cove LNG to this overall effort and the reductions of moving Western natural gas to Asia to reduce emissions.
So this is, I'm sorry, could you repeat the question again?
The importance of finishing a project like, the infrastructure projects like, Jordan Cove LNG and pipelines getting stuff from the west, from the western slope to West Coast to be exported.
Yeah.
And the impact that it has on achieving the goals and that you've highlighted that can happen in this report.
Well, the Jordan Cove. So this report, if just to touch on it, was based on analysis from Coos Bay, a report, LNG exported. We looked at two viable projects on the North American West Coast and kind of put the one LNG Canada aside, but really focused on Jordan Cove and Energía Costa Azul in Baja California, Mexico, that could utilize Rockies gas. And I'll kick it to you, Dr. Kasumu, to answer the emissions reductions part. There is an economic benefit as well. The communities that this gas would come from: Eastern Utah, Western Colorado, Southwestern Wyoming, have been trading. The gas has been trading at a discount for almost a generation. And so this a boost from these energy projects, we've estimated they could boost production in these western states by 20% or above. We've done other analysis on the multiplier effects of what would happen with that boost, but I'll leave that aside and let Dr. Kasumu talk specifically about the emissions reductions from Jordan Cove, from Energía Costa Azul.
Yeah, for sure, Andrew. Thank you for that. The report was, the study was based specifically on using two coastal facilities, and these are the Jordan Cove, as Andrew mentioned, and the Costa Azul in Baja California, because the life cycle emissions include ocean transport, and ocean transport is based on the distances, and these distances were based on Jordan Cove and Costa Azul, and the distances were proportionately prorated, based on the capacity that was proposed to be exported from both from these two facilities. I think about seven megatons per annum was proposed to be exported from Jordan Cove, while about 15 megatons per annum was proposed to be exported from coastal Azul. So to answer this question, yes, the completion of the Jordan coal facility is very, very important in terms of achieving the goals that this report has set for.
Great. I'd like to recognize Sean O'Brien with the Congressional Western Caucus. He's Executive Director over there for Chairman Dan Newhouse. If you have a question.
Thanks. Actually, I think it was largely just answered. That was going to be nearly exactly my question, was whether this was regarding current infrastructure versus capabilities in the future. You know, something that came to mind that Senator Daines is very familiar with is the fact that we've got some interesting politics in some of our states, including our state in Washington, where we block some of our fellow Westerners from being able to use export infrastructure to send resources to Asia. So I was curious to see how this was based on that. So I think you just answered my question, that it was specifically about those two pieces. So appreciate that thought there. And Daryl, I'll just flag that there is another question there in the chat. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Yeah, it just popped up here. How does this study and projects that you're working on help Native Americans to engage in energy development?
I'll answer that, Megan, you can jump in. The Western states is really focused on some of the questions have been asked. Rural economic development, tribal self-determination, and reducing global emissions through LNG exports. And the one of the founding members of our group was the Ute Indian tribe of Eastern Utah. We have the Southern Ute just joined us as of yesterday in Western Colorado, southwestern Colorado, and the Hickory Apache have joined us through their company Blackhawk Energy. They haven't joined at a formal MOU level yet. We're hoping they will do that. But all these tribes have their own energy companies that are a huge part in funding and supporting the tribal local economies, their services, their healthcare, their social welfare. We were incredibly impressed with what the Southern Ute had developed for themselves through the Southern Youth Growth Fund in our meeting yesterday. They are an important and active voice in what we do because they understand the impacts it has on these types of issues have on their tribe.
Great. I'm sure we're going to keep hearing a lot more about the study, and obviously, exporting cleaner energy from the U.S. to the rest of the world to lower overall global emissions is obviously a policy that benefits everyone, and we should continue to look at and pursue and find ways to move that. Joshua Sizemore, any questions? Or we don't see any more questions in the chat box. If you have one, pop them in real quick. Otherwise, we go to you, Joshua, for any last minute thoughts.
No, just I want to thank the crew for getting this together. I think it's important to highlight this issue, how the U.S. How our energy can help reduce global emissions. And so I really thank Mr. Browning and Dr. Kasumu for speaking today and on this important issue. I've sent around your report to everyone. If anyone on the line has not received it, I'm happy to do that again as well. Just again, thank you.
And for everyone watching, go ahead, Megan.
I just may add a few other thoughts for discussion. Going back to the Native American piece, I think I think a lot of what those communities and really a lot of these Western states are dealing with are trying to recover from the market conditions that have been in existence the past few days, starting back in 2008 with the price of natural gas really declining, and then in recent years with some coal-fired generation going offline, and then really, with the price of oil plummeting as well since 2014, and then again during the pandemic. So I think the advantage of facilitating a conversation like this and approving LNG terminals and really is a lot about supporting that workforce development up and down the value chain in a way that benefits the economically depressed areas like our tribal communities, and also reduces global greenhouse gas emissions. So yeah, so I wanted to put a pin in that aspect, if that spurs any other discussion. And then I know Sean mentioned political difficulties exporting through Washington State. We're also, a growing organization. We are, while this current study is focused on the Southern Rockies through the Sempra facility in California or in Mexico, we are in discussions with the province of Alberta, and we want to facilitate that export opportunity through the Pacific Northwest as well. Andrew, do you want to add anything to that? Because I think we have some North Dakotans on the line here too. So.
Yes. Jordan Cove, we really, our genesis of our organization was really to help pull Jordan Cove over the finish line, and that obviously that project is on I would say kind of on the shelf at this point. They for a number of reasons just that we've discussed, they just weren't able to get their state permits. We're hopeful we'll get another bite at that apple. But I think there's huge opportunities. With Canada, LNG Canada, there are a number of other potential sites for LNG development that could be a pull for the gas from the northern Rockies basins, Montana, North Dakota. We have been talking with the Alberta Ministry of Energy and about joining us, and we're hopeful that they will connect with us and join our organization. A lot of the foundation of our discussion was on global markets. The United States, the Western basins, and the United States, the North America in general, are competing with countries like Russia, the Middle East, to carve out these markets for their LNG. We feel that we're producing it in a more environmentally sound manner here that adheres to evolving ESG principles, and we think that there is a case to make that our allies in the Asian countries and other countries should buy their gas. It is more beneficial for them to buy gas from democracies with rule of law, sanctity of contracts, et cetera. We feel that the Canadians, our economies are basically, and certainly our energy infrastructures are basically integrated. That we're working on some of the same issues, and that we'll make good partners on some of these issues as we have these discussions globally. So hopefully we'll have some news soon about the province of Alberta.
Terrific. And thank you all for joining us with this. Remind everybody, we will be rebroadcasting this live feed on our Facebook page, and we'll also be posting the report up there and information as well. So if you want to share this with other folks, feel free to go there and push this out to them so others can, benefit from the information, this great study that's been done. So with that all, have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you back on one of our briefings soon. Thanks.
Thanks for having us.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.